Welcome to Futro Stories, where we tell missionary stories. Today I have a very special guest, Andrew Kimball.
I am very special.
You are. So tell us, where do you serve and what do you speak?
I served in the Switzerland Geneva mission speaking French. So for those of you that don't know, this also happens to be the same mission that Jordan's wife, Tatiana, served in. Although it was, 5 years before she was there, I think.
Yeah, yep. That's right. I always forget that. That's awesome. Did you have any other family members serve French speaking or anything?
Yeah, my brother served in French Canada in Quebec.
Love it. All right, well, let's get right into it. I'm excited to hear some stories. So let's start with one of your favorite stories.
All right. Well, my top favorite story would have to be in my third area in Luxembourg. So we had the entire country of Luxembourg as our area, which is not all that big because Luxembourg is a stamped country, postage stamp country, I think they call it. Anyway, so you have to understand that our mission was a lot of contacting on the street or in the bus. We didn't do a lot of door-to-door. We didn't have huge teaching pools. But we did have, every week, we had a mission goal that we would teach 21 times in the week, 21 lessons, and we always met that goal. But it was pretty much 21 first lessons on the street.
Yeah.
We didn't get a lot of callbacks. So in this particular area in Luxembourg, and I hated doing bus contacting because, I mean, it's already awkward enough to be talking about the gospel on the sidewalk with a bunch of people walking past you. And Luxembourg is a banking country, so you've got a lot of, you have a lot of people from England flying in the morning to work at the banks, and then they'll fly home at night. And so there's a commuter plane that goes to England.
That's crazy.
So yeah, I mean, we would contact people in English, in Portuguese. We actually lived in a Portuguese neighborhood from Portugal, not generally Brazilian. A lot of Spanish speakers, a lot of German speakers. Anyway, we were on the bus one day, and I was with a companion who so again, this was early in my mission, my third area. I think I'd been out for about 6 months, and this companion was an amazing kid, and he made it. I mean, it was already kind of a mission rule that no one followed very well, that you could only speak in your language while you were in your apartment, while you're talking to each other and everything. But he made me commit to doing just that. We never spoke to each other in English, ever. In fact, he doesn't really talk to me now. He's not a big social media or anything. We don't contact each other very much. I don't think that we've ever said more than a couple words to each other in English our entire lives. But it was probably the one time in my mission that I felt like I was following every rule, every mission rule, every rule of any missionary, but not just our mission rules. Anyway, so I see this story as a blessing that came from living an obedient lifestyle as a missionary. So we were in a bus, and like I said, he was obviously a better contactor and less awkward than I was on the bus. You got people sitting there not talking to each other, and here he breaks out in a conversation with this guy in kind of broken French because the guy was a Spanish speaker. I can't remember where he was from. His name was George. Anyway, he taught him about Joseph Smith and about the restoration of the gospel, and George expressed interest in knowing a little bit more. So Elder Anderson, he set up a follow-up lesson with this gentleman. Later that day or that week or something, it was a Saturday after we had contacted him. I can't remember what day we had contacted him, but on the Saturday we had an appointment outside of the city, outside of the capital city. I believe it was in a town. Well, I can't remember what town we were supposed to be in, but we got off at the wrong train station or something. So we were in this little town called Bettemborg, and when we realized that we were in the wrong town, we tried to get back, onto the train that would go take us back to the city, or take us to the area we needed to be in. But we were kind of out of luck. We were seconds away from catching the right train back to Luxembourg. So it was kind of late. It was in January. So late meaning that it was dark. And Elder Anderson said, well, we're here. We can't really contact in the road because there's no city center in this little town. And so how about we just walk around the streets and see if we can find, some subdivisions and knock on some doors. So we're walking around, and I point to a house that has a light on, and because I see some little tricycles and kid bikes, in the yard, and all Elder Anderson says is family, and we walk into the yard and we knock on the door, and we talk to the sweet lady, and she's got her kids, so she was a little busy, and said that we could come back the next week, and so we set up a follow-up appointment with her. And we go back to the city, and the follow-up appointment that we had with George was on Sunday, and he didn't show up. He was supposed to come to our church building and kind of stay after 3-hour meetings at the time, but he didn't show up. So that night, Elder Anderson had me call up George to see what was going on, and I called the phone number that he had given us, and his wife answers, and I kind of introduce who I am, and I say, we're just trying to get a hold of him. And she said, well, he's out of town this weekend, so I don't know why he would have set up the appointment. And in my mind, I'm thinking, oh, okay, it's another one of these stories. He didn't really want to come see us. And then she said, but I think two of your missionaries or some guys in suits came by my house last night and knocked on my door and set up an appointment. And when we had talked to George, we didn't have his address or anything. We didn't know he lived in a suburb of Luxembourg. We didn't know where he lived. We just had set up a follow appointment for at church. And here we are on the night before, knocking in this village that we had no business being in, and we found his family, essentially. And so we decided, or after talking to her, I said, well, I guess we'll just see you and George on Sunday or Saturday of this week. And so it was really cool to have that. A lot of people would say that's a coincidence, but we know that was the Lord working. What makes the story even cooler was that after we started teaching them I think we had maybe 2 lessons with them as a family. We were back in Luxembourg, knocking on doors in an apartment building. One reason that I didn't feel comfortable knocking on doors on my mission is because you had to sneak into the buildings because they all were locked, secured, and so the only way you could get into a building is by following someone in, or if the door locks were broken, and that felt a little underhanded as a missionary. Anyway, we were knocking in this little complex. There were probably 10 apartments in it, and we knock on the door, and I can't remember George's wife's name, but she answers the door at this apartment, and we're like, what are you doing here? And she said, well, this is my sister's house, my sister's apartment. So we started teaching the sister and the sister's husband. Just an incredible miracle to be able to see God working his hand with that particular family. I mean, that's my favorite story. It's kind of a letdown. It doesn't follow through for various reasons that I'm a little bit bitter about. But yeah, that's my favorite story. Sorry, it's kind of a long one.
Oh, not at all. I mean, I love seeing God's hand in things, and like you don't know what maybe seeds you of faith you planted there, and then where it is today. You know, because I imagine you're not in touch with them or anything. So
No, yeah, like I said, it got a little bitter. One of the missionary that replaced me in that area, he thought he was something special and had a come to Jesus moment with the family because they weren't progressing, and offended them, and
oh no,
they never wanted to talk to the missionaries again after that. So
oh geez.
really sad to see that. But you're right. I don't know where they are today or what they're thinking. I only pray that they still understand that Heavenly Father loves them and that there's a chance for them to know the gospel, right?
Yeah, by small and simple means. That's how God works. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
And then the second one would be a funny story. Yeah.
I couldn't really come up with any stories that I think are really that funny, except there was. I guess it's funny to some people. We only got held up once on my mission at gunpoint, and I don't know. I didn't know at the time that guns were illegal in France, so I don't know if it was a real gun or not. But there's a huge Arab population, and it was this. We were walking along a river trail, hoping to contact on the trail, and this. I mean, he was younger than us. We were 19 at the time, so I don't know. Maybe he was 16 or something. So I kind of think that it wasn't a real gun. I don't know. My companion sure thought it was a real gun, and I thought it was a real gun at the time. And the kid, he says to us, "Hey, are you Jesus Christ?" No. And he's got his gun out, and I didn't realize it at the time, but my companion did, and he was just cracking up because like he had grabbed his Book of Mormon, was kind of hugging it across his heart, and I had kind of lowered mine just to protect my family. So he was cracking up because I didn't care so much about him shooting me in the heart, I guess. So, sorry if that's an inappropriate joke or story, but that was kind of the funniest moment that I can remember.
I love it. Got to protect the prosperity. All right. And then if you have a wild story, that I can't believe that wasn't your wild story or crazy story.
I know, right? I didn't really have a lot of. I mean, it's a mission. How many wild experiences are you gonna have?
Well, maybe wild to you, but somebody else it might not be. But
true.
Serving in another country, just the cultural difference alone is crazy.
It's pretty wild, yeah. Well, Cassandra, my wife, shared in her story. You can check it out. She shared a lot of some foods that she had while in Brazil. I had horse tongue, and it was kind of crazy. You could feel the taste buds as you were chewing it, and you're like, "Oh, this is kind of weird." I had tripe soup, so it was cow intestines that had been boiled, and that was nasty. I guess kind of a crazy story. I did halfway through my mission, I lost feeling in half of my body, in my arm and leg. I went numb, I guess. So I had to stay overnight in a French hospital, which, if you've ever been to a European hospital, it's like they converted the World War II bunkers into hospitals just because they had the buildings. Like, it was just no windows, a cement building, and almost no doors, like just curtain hangers.
It sounds more like an insane asylum.
I seriously felt like I was in a bunker. Like,
Did, did they
this is the
have
safest
padding
place. Like,
walls, Andrew?
yeah. Well, maybe my
Were you in a
companion took me
straitjacket?
somewhere else. Yeah. So anyway, I stayed there overnight. When I woke up in the morning, like they just didn't attend to me very well, and my IV had run out of fluids, so instead of giving me fluids, it was starting to suck the blood up into
Oh my gosh.
the IV. That was another kind of weird thing. My mission president had me transferred to Switzerland, to Geneva, just because there was an MRI specialist that was a member. And so I had my MRI in Switzerland, stayed there for a couple days, called home, and that's another long story. But in the end, they couldn't figure out what was going on. It wasn't a stroke. It wasn't a heart attack, which limb numbness is a sign of those kind of things. Just kept going, and it went away.
That's crazy. Yeah, that's telling me you don't have crazy stories. I mean, I can think of one off the top of my head. The fact that you got home from your mission and you're going to get married to Cassie, and then she decided to serve a mission.
Well, that's not a mission story, though.
Yeah, it is. I mean, you had written her, like, was it every week or once a month?
Oh, I wrote her every week. She wrote me once a month. But
That's right. I remember because she got so giddy every time she got a letter from you. Oh my gosh. She was so excited.
Yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting story. I actually, it was in that same area, like that my limbs went numb in. I was in that same area for Mother's Day. And sorry, if President Nadald is listening, I apologize. I broke a mission rule on Mother's Day. I did call Cassandra. She didn't answer, so I felt like I was okay. Now I'm following the rules. It's okay. I'm sorry. I broke the rule. It was hard because we had the phone in our apartment, so she had caller ID and called me back in the middle of the night, not knowing the time change. And my companion, Elder Gorley, picks up the phone. And he's like, he answered in French, and he's like, Cassandra said something to him in English, and he's like, Elder Kimball, I think somebody's calling you that shouldn't be calling you. But we had a nice chat, didn't we, Cassandra? Yeah, it was fun.
I love it. Why does that sound so familiar? I feel like Dad might have found out about that and was really upset or something.
I've told the family. I don't think I've ever admitted it to anyone else in my mission, though. Elder Gorley knew, so he may have told some other elders and sisters. I don't know.
Love it. Oh, jeez. Okay, man, all these great stories. And then to wrap it up, if you want to share a spiritual one and then go right into your testimony, and you can share it in the language that you spoke on your mission if you'd like.
Yeah, well, I don't know that I have a particular spiritual story to share. And I mean, my favorite story is a pretty spiritual one. You know, that I could see the blessings of being an obedient missionary, and that was such a hard thing that I could never convince another companion. Like, I knew that was that was the hardest mission rule to obey, was to speak in French to your companion all the time. And I could never convince any of my other companions to do that. Nothing against them. It's just a really hard rule to follow. It is really tough to communicate when you know you can communicate better in English. So I don't know that I have any other like really special spiritual stories about my mission, but I do see it as I could not get enough literature to read on. My mission wasn't like a lot of North or South American missions where you get fed by the members all the time. It was very rare that we got to eat with members. And so most of the time we'd go back to our apartment for lunch. We had an hour for lunch, and then an hour and a half for dinner, and we would just eat pasta and then either sleep or read. And that was the most reading I've done in the gospel ever, because we couldn't have any other literature. But I loved reading the ensigns. I loved reading talks. I loved reading the gospel library books. I loved reading my great great grandfather is Heber C. Kimball, one of the first apostles in the restoration of the church, and reading his journals. I was able to read his journals, and I gained a huge respect for my predecessors. I gained a huge appreciation for the knowledge that church leaders can pass to us. So that's my spiritual experience. And then for my testimony in French, je demande si vous êtes francophone, je suis désolé parce que ça fait quelques années depuis que j'ai parlé en français couramment. Et mais je veux partager mon témoignage de Jésus-Christ. Quand j'avais 15 ans, j'ai prié et c'était une prière spéciale. Il y a 2 fois dans ma vie que j'avais cette expérience que j'avais entendu la réponse de Dieu en prière. Et cette fois-ci, c'était une prière de Joseph Smith et son témoignage de sa vision, de l'expérience qu'il avait en étant le prophète de Dieu. Je demandais si Joseph Smith était le prophète de Dieu et il me répondit que Joseph Smith était le serviteur de Dieu. Et l'esprit était autour de moi et chaque fois que nous avons un prophète qui est appelé, Gordon B. Hinckley, Thomas S. Monson et maintenant aussi Russell M. Nelson, chaque fois qu'un prophète est appelé, je sens l'esprit avec la même fortitude me témoigne que ces hommes ont les prophètes de Dieu. Ils sont appelés de Dieu, qu'ils veulent partager le message de Jésus-Christ dans ces mots. Pas les mots des prophètes, mais le mot de Dieu, le mot de Jésus-Christ. Et ça, c'est le fondement de mon témoignage, que les prophètes parlent couramment en ce moment la parole de Dieu. Ils partagent les messages de Dieu pour nous aujourd'hui. Et ces témoignages sont les fondements de mon témoignage. Si Joseph Smith n'est pas vrai, l'Église n'est pas vraie. Mais Joseph Smith était un prophète de Dieu et il a établi l'Église de Jésus-Christ des Saints des derniers jours. Et cette Église est la vraie Église de Jésus-Christ sur la terre maintenant. Et je sais ces choses au nom de Jésus-Christ. Amen.
Amen.